Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, and it is now a course at NYU and an elective towards the journalism certificate. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed. And today I am so excited to be speaking with Liz Elting. And Liz is the author of this fabulous new book, Dream Big and Win, Translating Passion into Purpose and Creating a Billion-Dollar Business. So welcome to the program, Liz.
Oh, thank you so much, Estelle. I'm so excited to be here. So thanks so much for having me.
It's such a pleasure having you. And I want to tell my listeners and viewers a little bit about you. So I'm going to read your bio. And Liz Elting, founder and CEO of the Elizabeth Elting Foundation, is an entrepreneur, business leader, best-selling author, linguophile, philanthropist, feminist, and mother. She's the best-selling author of Dream Big and Win, which I just showed you. After living, studying, and working in 5 countries, Liz founded TransPerfect out of an NYU dorm room in 1992 and served as co-CEO until 2018. TransPerfect is the world's largest language solutions company with over $1.1 billion in revenue and offices in more than 100 cities worldwide. Liz received the 2019 Charles Waldo Haskins Award for Business and Public Service from NYU's Stern School of Business, the American Heart Association's 2020 Health Equity Leadership Award, the Alliance of Women Entrepreneurs 2021 Vertex Award for changing the face and direction of women's high-growth entrepreneurship, the American Heart Association's 2022 Women Changing the World Award, Trinity College's 2022 Kathleen O'Connor Bellhauer 85 Alumni Initiative Award, and the Gabriel's Angel Foundation's 2023 Angel of Hope Award. Liz has been recognized as a NOW, N-O-W, Woman of Power and Influence, American Express's and Entrepreneurs Magazine's Woman of the Year, and one of Forbes' richest self-made women every year since the list's inception. So that is quite a catalog of very venerable accomplishments that you should be so proud of. And it's such an honor to have someone who is changing the world on my program. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Estelle. Really appreciate that intro, and it's so great to be here.
So Liz, you are everywhere talking about your book and talking about the business tenets that led you to the success that you've had. But I want to kind of skew a little bit differently because the focus of this podcast is on publishing, and it's for writers and for people who want to tell their story. And as I poured through this book, and I've done it several times now, you really told your stories. And I think that is so important rather than that, just the how-to of how to do business. So can you talk a little bit about the beginning of the book, how the idea came to you in the middle of all your accomplishments, and your path to publication, and how you decided your stories are important and how you wanted them in the book.
Thank you. And I really appreciate your asking all of that. Yes. So the reason I decided to write the book is because it's the book that I had always wanted. It was the book I wanted when I started my career in my 20s. And actually, when I just graduated from business school, I started reading every business book I could get my hands on. And there wasn't anything out there like this. They were kind of how-to books, very dry. Do this, then do that, then do this, then do that. And I wanted something much more relatable, much more authentic, much more vulnerable. And I wanted to be able to relate to the person who was telling the story. And I wanted the anecdote component. I love reading bios or autobiographies. And so that's what I wanted. And so I tried to make it like a beach read business book. That's what I tried to do with this book, to make it a more fun, entertaining business read. But what led me to do it is, as you mentioned, I was an entrepreneur for 26 years, loved being an entrepreneur, learned so much from the things I did right and the many things I did wrong. And then I started my foundation, and I was loving running my foundation, and I still am. But one of my favorite things to do was to talk about entrepreneurship, to talk about business and how I did what I did. And so I thought, why, instead of just speaking here and there, why not put it in a book, the book that I always wanted? So that's really what led me to write this book. And then I can tell you a little background on how I actually got to
Yes,
write
you
this
had a
book and get it
long
published.
journey to publication. So why
Yes.
don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this could be relevant to our listeners. So I sold my company in 2018, and I had been an entrepreneur for 26 years. So I had no experience with publishing, none in the industry. I hadn't been a writer, an editor, any of that. But in 2019, I thought it would be great to tell my story for the reasons I just said. So what I did is I I basically started working with an agent, and with someone helping me put together a proposal. It was about a 75 or 80 page proposal. And it was really telling my story. And it had summary of each chapter. I had an intro and all the things a proposal has. And I bet a lot of your listeners, know what a 75 or 80 page proposal has. But I thought we had done a really great job, but it was basically my story. So the agent sent it out to 25 publishers, and basically all 25 came back with the same message. They said, Liz, your story looks really interesting. It looks like you've been very successful, but you're not a household name, and you don't have a huge social media presence. So we're not really ready to do this memoir type book. And I thought, oh, and they said, so work on that for a few years and come back to us. I thought, oh, great. So I need to work on social media. Oh, no, because that is not my thing, creating a social media presence. That's not what I wanted to do. But I kept going about doing what I was doing. I did my philanthropy. I spoke about entrepreneurship. And the two other things, I have a couple blogs. I write 2 articles a month for Forbes and 1 article a month for Sway. So I kept doing that. And then in the fall of 2021, so about 2.5 years later, Wiley came to me. And Wiley was not one of the 25 publishers. And they said, Liz, we see you online. We love your thought leadership. And if you haven't done a book, we'd love to do one with you. I thought, great. I get to do a book. And it was really interesting because I still didn't have a big social media presence, but I was thrilled. And what they said is, let's make it a sort of how-to / memoir as opposed to a straight memoir. And I thought, well, that does make a lot of sense, because who's going to want to read my memoir, right? I thought I may as well share my knowledge and make sure there's a good amount of that in there. So that's what led me to write this book. So that was in the fall of 2021. And then in the fall of this year, we published it. And so that's the story. I'm sure you have a lot to say on that, Estelle, because you've been through this whole crazy process for a long time.
Well, I think, first of all, that's so inspirational that you're saying it that way. There's so many people that they want to publish, and maybe it didn't work the first time with an agent. And I've had several agents in my career, and some didn't work well either. And you actually published without an agent. What I see here is what's important with writing is important with business. It's really the same thing. It's having that resilience and having that grit. And you talk about it in your book and you exemplify it. And I think I have a 30-year career in publishing. I exemplify that too, on a different scale than you, of course, but you never give up in what you want to do and how you want to go about doing it. And so you found another road and you listened to good advice. And maybe social media wasn't your favorite thing to do, but you knew you had to build your thought leadership and get yourself out there and get yourself noticed, which is what I talk about in my book, how to do that with writing.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And yeah, and what I didn't say is for those 2.5 years, certainly I kept up with my blogs, but I also did focus on my social media presence. I didn't want to. It's not my favorite thing. I love interacting with people in person and, one-to-one or even a big group where I'm meeting them and I'm looking at their faces. So social media has been challenging for me, but I knew that I would need to do it no matter what I did, whether it was to publish a book or whatever I did next. We all need a brand out there. And I actually have been talking a lot about that. My good friend Liz Elting has a new book out called On Brand. And it's all about how we all need a brand, but certainly for publishing. Absolutely. And I know, Estelle, you talk about that in your book. I absolutely loved your book. And I remember that section. And I thought, boy, I can relate to that. Need to build that social media presence and need to get out there.
And you do, and it conveys your warmth as well. And I think, I remember when we first met through our good friend Bobby Ravel, who just wonderful person. And you were talking to me about, you were at the point where you were talking about your book cover. And you were, and
I was.
as you can see, we both have a love of a certain color.
We do. We bonded on that in the first meeting because you were wearing this beautiful fuchsia blouse. I remember it. Yes. Anyway, go ahead.
I think yes, you did notice that. And so we started talking about what you wanted for your cover, and you were very hands-on, which I appreciate. And that's advice that I give writers. Like, if there is something you're going to really want to have input in, it's the vision of the book and it's also the cover of the book. And so can you talk a little bit about the discussion that we had over the cover? Because it's very tantamount to anybody who is publishing a book.
Yes. And believe me, I can talk about all the now I can talk about, as I guess a lot of first-time authors can, all that I did right, the things I did right, and the many things I did wrong that I would do differently with a second book. But I remember that conversation about the book cover, and I struggled probably more than any part of the book with the book cover. I mean, that was the crazy thing. I mean, the book, I got that written. I mean, it was hours and hours, kind of as you were saying earlier, Estelle. Grit, perseverance, don't quit, stay with it, work hard. Yes, but it was working. It kept getting better and better. And then, of course, the title, that's the other thing that we can come back to. But the cover, I struggled with that cover.
Just tell me some of your wants that you wanted to have that you got on the cover.
So I'll try to make this brief, but the first 6 or 9 months that I was working with Wiley while I was writing the book, they said, send us a photo of yourself that you really love because we'll put it on the cover. And I thought, oh my God, I've got to get a great picture of myself. Now this is another stress because it's hard to find a great picture of yourself that you want on a book cover. Anyway, I finally got photos to them and they came back to me and they gave me, and they had warned me about this a few months before I got the photo to them. They said, and this is really interesting, they said, Liz, we know we're telling you to give us a picture, but we may recommend we not use it because putting your photo on the cover of a book, if you're not a known name, can actually narrow readership. That was what they said. But that said, I still got them a photo. I had a photo shoot. Yes, that I got them that photo and maybe 10 others. I gave them some choices. And they ended up coming back to me with 8 potential covers. The first 4 had my photo on it. One was that, and then there were a few others. And then the second 4 didn't. And in a nutshell, they said the same thing. They said, we absolutely love this first one with your cover, but we may not want to go with it at Canara readership. So the bottom line is we ended up not going with the cover with my picture, but they said, but we'll put a full kind of vertical picture of you on the back, which they did, which Estelle just held up. But I thought that was an interesting approach. We're actually having another version come out with me on the cover that I did directly with my publisher, but that is not going to be sold online. It's not going to be sold in any brick and mortar stores. It's just for me to sell for my bulk orders. And perhaps we'll do something like that on the paperback, but that's a whole other piece of it. But the important point I think that might be relevant to all of you if you're going through this process is I do think it's a great idea to know what you want on the cover, because I struggled so much on that cover because I thought it would have me on it. Once we decided not to put me on it, I thought, boy, I don't know what I want because I've never thought of this. And the part I struggled most with, and I talked about with Estelle at that party, was my favorite color is pink, fuchsia, bright pink. And probably my second favorite color is purple. And I wanted pink or purple to go on the cover. Probably I would have picked them before the red. But I struggled so much because my other big issue with my book is this going to be a woman's book by a woman for women exclusively? Or do I want this to be for anyone who's young and starting out in business, or not so young, empty nester who's starting out in business or starting something new and wants to either be an entrepreneur or be in a business environment? So that said, I took the approach, I'm going to make this for everyone. I'm not going to narrow readership to 50% of what it could be from day one. So I went with red, but that was the big struggle, right, Estelle? I mean,
yeah, I remember that. And you wanted the gold. You also wanted the gold in there, the glitter, the gold dust. There was iterations of that. And then you wanted your name really standing out, and the gold is what you ended up using. I think some iterations had it only in black or a color.
I think it's so hard thinking, and I'm all about thinking about who's your market. In marketing, you've got to know who your market is, right? But with a book, it can be tricky because you don't necessarily know who's going to go for it. Whereas in business, what I found as an entrepreneur is we could target a certain group and then we could keep fine tuning with each. We were in the service business. Each project could be different for each client. We could keep coming up with new iterations of what we were doing, new products, new technologies, new services. But with the book, whatever you come up with, it's out there. It's what you're committing to for till the end of that book, and or at least till the end of that first printing, the hardcover or the paperback or whatever you start with. So that's what I think it's really important to think about. Okay, who's this for? And with the cover, what do I want in advance? Because that's the one thing that I struggled with along the way.
And it's so important. You mentioned service, right? Because you were in a service business. And so setting up a book is a service as well. And it's so interesting because you and I both used a technique in our book to kind of sidebar information. You used Liz's life lessons, and I used Estelle's edge.
I remember that. Yes. Sorry, go on. And I noticed your alliteration, and I know you love alliteration, and I do too.
Love. Yes, we both share a love of alliteration. And you also had facts that matter and also words of wisdom, which facts are the pieces of information that's related to money and to discrepancies and all sorts of researched information. And words of wisdom are you took advice from like Yo-Yo Ma and other experts and people who have spoken about business and sprinkled that throughout the book, which breaks up the copy, number one. And the other really interesting choice you made, and I think it's important to point this out again because of the audience here, is in the beginning, you talk about active verbs and the importance of active verbs and how you use that to structure each chapter with like create, refining the purpose.
Perfecting. The thought there was a lot of people have dreams and we can all dream, we can all create vision boards, but it's about the actions that are going to get us there. And we need to, we need to put in the time, put in the effort, not quit, persevere. I talk about how there are so many smart people out there with often brilliant ideas, but they don't necessarily want to commit to putting in the time. They may get distracted after a week or a month, after a year. And instead, you really got to commit to it and be tough on yourself and give yourselves goals each day and make sure you accomplish those goals, or the actions that will make it so you accomplish those goals. I say doing eclipses dreaming, because you can dream all you want, but you have to make sure you do. And that's what separates the men from the boys, or the women from the girls. One other thing I say is work today like no one else will, so you can live and give tomorrow like no one else can. And I think a lot of people get distracted, and that's why they don't, whether it's write that book or build that company or pursue that dream and make it a success.
I think so. Like, I find your book so inspiring, and I think it's going to be so inspiring, and is so inspiring to people who are maybe just starting out in corporate America, as I like to call it. I mean, I had no idea that I would end up where I ended up. You know, when I started, I was a communications major, and I thought I was going to do public relations, and, you know, discovered the world of publishing, and really kind of, except for a 7-year foray into medical education, and then coming back in a different way. So it's just so interesting how our journeys take us, and we learn from our mistakes. And it was important for you to share your stories and to share your mistakes. So you're taking 26 years of being in the business world and building, and you're honing that down into stories in like the chapters of a book. That's hard, because you have to pick and choose the most important stories. Were there stories that were left on the cutting room floor that you just I can see it in your face?
Yes, right. And that, as you know, as an author, and you all can relate to this at least as much as I can, but yeah, it's a little heartbreaking, because sometimes those are the ones that you feel so passionate about, but there are reasons you don't include them, right? And I'm sure you found this with what you've written, and you mentioned this also in your book, Estelle, but whether you have to, you need to concern yourself with the people in your life who they're about, because often those great stories involve other people. Usually they do. And yes, I mean, I have people in my life who are a lot more private than I am, or, you know, I don't want to offend them if I say something. Or I had quite a crazy situation with my ex-business partner. And I mean, that's a whole other book. I almost talked about that in detail, and instead I just kind of alluded to it in chapter 14, because I didn't want to make this book about that. So that's the choice.
That
So
answers my other question. Is there another book in you? And it sounds like there is.
I think at some point, yes. But, you know, another thing about it, and I think we're not that far apart as far as the number of months. Yours came out in June, right?
Yeah.
Mine came out in September. I bet a lot of people ask you if there's another book in you, right? If you're going to write another book.
Oh, there definitely.
But you know what I find, and for me, I've learned so much from this process. And we've talked a lot about the writing of the book and how you decide what to say and not what to say, and the cover and the title. The other big piece of it is you become your chief marketing officer, your chief sales officer. And I guess authors and freelance authors are used to doing that anyway, right? They are. But they have their clients at a certain point, and they're not doing it all day long. Whereas with the book, I mean, that's what I've been doing this year, right? I wrote the book in 2022. I've been marketing and selling it this year. And I've talked to a lot of people about my plan, and I'm not ready to think about another. Instead, I'm thinking, okay, for the next year, it's going to be all about leveraging this book, using this book, getting the word out there about this book, rather than getting into something new and distracting myself with something new yet. So that's my thought. I don't know what your plan is, Estelle.
Because I'm a writing teacher and it's a lot of what I do,
Yeah.
the book is sort of just a part of the fabric of my life. But because I'm a storyteller first and a teacher second, I do have stories in me to tell. So they will be coming out in different genres. It won't be another writing book, or it might be another writing book. I'm working on a novel and I'm working on a memoir, not at the same time. But to me, a storyteller is a storyteller. So that's sort of how I see it. That's a whole nother episode. But it's really important that I think a writer who, or somebody who wants to tell their story, keeps control of the story. Like, how does a writer keep control of their story when they're working with a big team? Like you're working with a big team as well.
Yeah, I mean, I did find with mine, and I don't know how it worked with you with your publisher, but they really deferred to me on everything, which I completely appreciated because I've heard sometimes that's not the case with the publisher and you do lose control of your story. So then it was just, okay, what is the purpose of this book and who is the target market here? Because I want to make it about what they want to hear.
For me, my publisher was very supportive of my vision and what I wanted to do. I think it's important to make sure you're aligned with your publisher. And for me, it was more, I felt like it was a partnership, like they were really respectful and all that. And it sounds like you have that situation too. I think there are some people, though, that their publishers will take advantage maybe of their greenness. I mean, I'm certainly not green in the industry, even though I haven't. This is my first solo book. I co-authored and I've been in anthologies. So I understand the publishing process more than maybe most. And this was a new process to you, but like you said, they deferred to your expertise and your experience package that you came with, and they came to you. So I had asked you about your experience with the book and writing and what you're doing with it, and you're doing so much speaking. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to share about your publishing journey or what you've done or the writing process, anything?
Yeah, and I want to make it relevant to the listeners. So, yeah, I mean, I think having that social media presence, having thought leadership out there, and keeping it up is so important because you obviously heard that from my anecdote that I almost didn't get it published because I didn't have the social media presence. Fortunately, I had some articles up there and that got me there. So I think that's super important. Then, as I said, I think you write the book, you tell your story the way you want to, and then it becomes about marketing and selling the book. And that's been all year. So I think that's a huge part of the process if you want to sell a lot of books. And I think even the year, or I don't know how long after, because I'm in early days. I only published it 2 months ago, but I think it's important to stick with that marketing and selling it. And that's through speaking engagements, it's through your relationships and not quitting, because I imagine just leaving it up there on Amazon, that that's not the key, right? So
Right.
I think that's a super important part of the process. Yeah, and I think it's such a joy. I understand now why authors find it so gratifying. I also understand why it's so difficult, and I have so much admiration for authors because deciding what to say and what not to say, especially related to the people in your life and how it could affect them, or how it could affect other people's perception of you, is a challenge. And I think you just have to open up and be true to yourself. But of course think, am I going to regret saying this in 5 or 10 years? Not doing that. And I think that's the question on some of the things when we get into the personal stuff. So yeah.
That's a really good point. And have you had any blowback from any of that stuff that you mentioned?
I haven't. And as I said, I didn't say everything I could have said at all, but I haven't. And, I'm glad because this was
Good.
largely a learning experience. We learn so much from the first time we do anything. And so, yes, but no, so far so good. Thank you.
That's good to hear. And so you've talked about social media, and I know that my listeners and viewers want to follow you. So where can they follow you? And I'll put everything in the show notes.
Oh, thank you. At Liz Elting on LinkedIn, Instagram, the other platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Threads. And then my website is lizelting.com. My foundation website is elizabetheltingfoundation.org. And then the book is sold on any online retailer, including Amazon, of course.
Everywhere books are sold.
Everywhere. That's even better. That's a better way to say it.
Thank you so much, Liz. It's really been a pleasure having you speak with me.
Thanks so much to you, Estelle. I've loved speaking with you.
Follow me at EstelleSErasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.